The changes that have been occurring recently have been a long time coming. Sure, coal is endangering our atmosphere and the people who mine it. Forests are being pummeled through and replaced by buildings and other corporate establishments. And our climate is steadily rising to uninhabitable heats, but none of it is new. This has been building up for generations. The only fresh thing to arise from all this is a united generation dedicated to preservation and to ending this long-taught exploitation of the planet we occupy.
And though everyone is just trying to do what they think is best, no one really knows where the line should be drawn.
It's a sticky place to end up. The fact is that there are a lot of things about consumption of resources that we cannot know.
But today, we wanted to look into something more tangible, the humanity within consuming bee products like honey. How does it get to us?
Where does it come from?
We have a pretty good idea where it comes from, actually.
I'm Gretchen Upton.
And I'm Eleanor Lawrence.
And this is White Box, our podcast examining the hidden side of honey production. When it takes 12 bees an entire lifetime to develop just 1 teaspoon of honey, why are we consuming honey in such reckless rates? And how is it getting to us so quickly?
The rates we consume honey at aren't reckless, really. And look, a quick search of should we take honey from bees shows views from people from PETA to vegan bros to popular science, but it seems like the only people who really care are hardcore environmentalists.
Considering how important bees are to us here locally in Shreveport and generally to everyone who likes not starving, we should probably do some research before assuming everyone who doesn't eat honey is your vegan Aunt Juniper who says plants will go taller if you're nice to them.
So the first argument is probably one of economics.
You're saying we should care more about money than the rights and humanity of bees?
Probably. U.S. Industry Honey Report from 2016 says that Americans are consuming 160 million pounds of domestic and almost 370 million pounds of foreign honey. Calculate that with population, and everyone is eating about 1.5 pounds of honey a year. And the gap between production and imports means we should be harvesting even more of this stuff here.
Okay, but that's like a really small fraction of all stuff ever. Those same numbers only show up around $330 million in honey money in the US. As a percentage of GDP, that's 0.002%. Not really a cornerstone of American production.
Okay, but why do we care even if it is a small number? Anything earned taking honey from bees is just good for us, and the bees don't actually care, do they?
You're defining the very nature of the problem. It's ethics. It's about exploitation. Who are we to allow profit from something without regard for the life of the organism? In large corporate farms, they replace the honey with a subpar sugar substitute. We force them into unnatural living conditions, so much so that the New York Times reported they have moved from shapes that accommodate their own geometry to flat-topped tenements, sentenced to life in file cabinets. In trying to better capitalize on them, we've reduced their natural genetic diversity. We clipped their wings of the queen, not to mention colony collapse disorder.
Hold on, what's colony collapse disorder?
The EPA defines it as a phenomenon where worker bees leave the hive and the queen, and as a result of, well, no one is sure, but the theories that have been the center of the most scientific focus are pesticide poisoning through exposure to pesticides applied to crops or for in-hive insect or mite control, stress that bees experience due to management practices such as transportation to multiple locations across the country for providing pollination services, changes to the habitat where bees forage, inadequate forage and poor nutrition, or potential immune-suppressing stress on bees caused by one or a combination of factors identified above. All of these occur as a result of large-scale beekeeping, people trying to maximize their profit.
Hold on, I'm looking at the same stats you are, and it looks like bee deaths as a result of CCD have almost halved since 2014. So how's that happening when we're ruthlessly exploiting the bees?
They haven't been testing for CCD recently, though, so who knows what those numbers are now.
I think this is more about temperatures during shipping, though. The USDA found in 2016 that the main cause of queen death or lower fertility was the low temperatures they're exposed to during shipping. That's not the fault of the beekeepers.
But it is. The bees shouldn't be shipped across the country for no reason other than the beekeepers couldn't take care of the colonies in the first place.
But that's not all honey-making colonies, though. How often are these a result of commercial beekeeping, and how many would be inevitable in the wild? Or even just the world of pollution we live in now?
Look, nothing we've been talking about even matters in the context of foreign honey making. The U.S. gets most of its imported honey from Vietnam. The Bao On Vietnam, a Vietnamese newspaper, looked into the Vietnam National Apiculture Company making honey there and found that it developed research facilities to look into bee science. They also train their workers so they can produce honey at their own homes for a small profit, encouraging economic mobility for small Vietnamese families.
That sounds pretty good in theory, but I personally wouldn't rush to buy Vietnamese honey.
And why not?
I've seen some food safety news reports that say honey from Vietnam and India, another major exporter to the US, can carry significant safety risks and has been banned in much of the European Union, but is being smuggled to the US without proper safety checks through China.
What risks are there?
There have been accounts of heavy metal poisoning and bacterial contamination.
That's fair, but I think there's a question of whether the honey is from Vietnam and India or from Chinese beekeepers where the safety problems are more salient. Even so, it's better than our corporations in the States. Here, people don't even care about the bees that they're ruthlessly murdering.
Actually, I read a study done for Journal of Ethnobiology and Ethnomedicine by a couple of different scientists about the incentives for beekeeping. They found that the most common incentive for starting to keep bees was an interest in beekeeping and a care for bees.
Not the money they could make?
Well, the type of bees was largely an economic call, but the impetus for starting the farms was more often interest and compassion for bees. These small family farms are, I think, the best form of beekeeping we've seen.
But there's a line to be drawn on that side too. Urban beekeeping has become kind of a booming trend lately as people try to take action themselves, but it's really not helping anything. Gonzalez Varro of Cambridge's zoology department commented on this, saying, keeping honeybees is an extractive activity. It removes pollen and nectar from the environment, which are natural resources needed by many wild species of bee and other pollinators. The fact is that these are living things and should not be kept recreationally, especially not by amateurs. You're right, though, that smaller family farms tend to treat the bees best.
It doesn't seem like there's any way to win with you. How are we expected to contribute to the saving of bees without collapsing that industry entirely, especially when we aren't supposed to take action on our own?
I'm still not sure we shouldn't entirely collapse the industry, but for the sake of your corporate heart, I would encourage smart consumption. Before you buy, ask yourself if it's locally sourced, so you can ensure that whoever you are buying from is encouraging balanced beekeeping, keeping it organic so they aren't using the pesticides often associated with things like CCD, and that it's fair trade so we can respect the rights of human workers too.